r/MaliciousCompliance. Dad called me cheap, so I cost him his dream vacation. You're embarrassing this entire family. Dad's voice cut through the chatter at Romano's, loud enough that the couple at the next table stopped mid-conversation to stare. My cheeks burned as I clutched the little stack of coupons I'd pulled from my wallet, 20% off appetizers, buy one get one pasta, the usual suspects I'd collected from the Sunday paper. I'm just trying to save us some money, I said quietly, shoving the coupons back into my purse. These are perfectly good. Perfectly good. Dad's laugh was sharp and ugly. Sarah, you're 22 years old. Act like it. This cheap nonsense has got to stop. Around the table, my family shifted uncomfortably. Mom studied her wine glass like it held the secrets of the universe. My younger brother Jake suddenly found his phone fascinating. My aunt and uncle, visiting from Portland, exchanged those looks that screamed family drama in flashing neon letters. I work 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I budget every dollar so I can pay for school without drowning in debt. Using coupons isn't cheap, it's smart. Dad leaned back in his chair, straightening his expensive tie, the one he probably bragged cost more than my monthly grocery budget. You know what's smart? Not humiliating your family over a few dollars. Look around, Sarah. Look at this place. I did look around. Romano's wasn't exactly fine dining, but it wasn't Applebee's either. The kind of place where entrees ran $25 to $35 and they gave you 3 pieces of asparagus like they were doling out precious gems. Your father works hard so we can enjoy nice things, Dad continued, gesturing broadly. I don't pinch pennies and embarrass everyone just to save pocket change. The server approached our table with the cautious expression of someone who'd clearly overheard the tension. Ready to order. As we went around the table, I watched the prices add up in my head. Dad ordered the lobster tail with filet mignon, $48. Mom got the rack of lamb, $36. Even Jake, still in high school, ordered the salmon, $28. When it was my turn, I ordered the chicken parmesan, the cheapest entree at $19, and caught Dad's disapproving head shake. The meal passed in stilted conversation about Jake's basketball season and my aunt's new job. I picked at my chicken, watching Dad dominate the conversation, regaling everyone with stories about his upcoming European vacation. 3 weeks in Italy, France, and Spain. First-class flights. 5-star hotels. Private tours of the Vatican. I've been planning this for 2 years, he said, cutting into his lobster with theatrical precision. Life's too short to settle for less than the best. When the check came, $237, Dad looked directly at me. We'll split this 6 ways. That's about $40 each. My stomach dropped. $40 for a $19 meal because everyone else had ordered drinks, appetizers, and premium entrees. Actually, could we maybe just pay for what we ordered individually? I only had. Unbelievable. Dad's voice rose again. Absolutely unbelievable. You're going to nickel and dime your own family. The restaurant felt like it was holding its breath. I could feel eyes on us from every direction. Fine, I said, pulling 2 20s from my wallet, money I'd earmarked for textbooks. $40. Dad smiled triumphantly. See? Was that so hard? The drive home was suffocating silence until Dad decided to twist the knife a little deeper. You know what your problem is, Sarah? He caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. You think small. You act small. And that's exactly what you'll always be. I stared out the window at the suburban houses blurring past, each one probably worth more than I'd make in 5 years. There's nothing wrong with being careful with money. Careful. Dad snorted. You count every penny like you're living in the Great Depression. It's pathetic. You think your little coupon collection makes you financially responsible, but all it does is broadcast to everyone that you don't understand how the real world works. Mom finally spoke up from the passenger seat. Richard, maybe we should. No, Linda. She needs to hear this. Dad's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've built everything we have from nothing. You think I got there by haggling over restaurant bills and waving around newspaper clippings? Success requires vision. It requires taking risks and thinking bigger than your next grocery store discount. Jake shifted uncomfortably beside me, probably wishing he'd driven separately. Smart kid. I'm not trying to get rich off coupons, I said. I'm trying not to graduate with $50,000 in debt like most of my friends. And what's your plan after graduation? Dad's voice dripped condescension. You going to coupon your way to a career? Show up to job interviews with a fistful of expired Bed Bath & Beyond discounts? We pulled into the driveway of the house I'd grown up in, 4 bedrooms, 3-car garage, the kind of place that screamed suburban success story. Dad had reminded me at least 100 times over the years how hard he'd worked to afford it. As we got out of the car, he was still going. You want to know the difference between us, Sarah? I'm flying first class to Rome in 3 weeks because I understand that you have to spend money to enjoy life. You'll be clipping coupons in some studio apartment, wondering why life passed you by. That European vacation. He'd been talking about it non-stop for months, showing anyone who'd listen the hotel websites, the restaurant reservations, the guided tour confirmations. 3 weeks of living like royalty, funded by what he called smart financial planning, though I happened to know it was mostly going on his travel rewards credit card. Must be nice, I muttered, shouldering my purse. What was that? I turned to face him, something hot and reckless building in my chest. I said it must be nice. Having enough money to throw around that you can shame your own daughter for trying to be responsible. Dad's face darkened. Responsible? You embarrassed me in front of my sister and brother-in-law tonight. You made our entire family look cheap over $20. I made us look cheap. Or you made yourself look like a bully. Watch your mouth, young lady. As long as you're living under my roof. I don't live under your roof. I live in a dorm room I pay for myself, remember? With my pathetic part-time job and my embarrassing budgeting skills. The front porch light cast harsh shadows across Dad's face. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. Then his expression hardened into that familiar look of superiority I'd been seeing my whole life. You'll learn, he said, pulling out his keys. Eventually you'll figure out that being cheap isn't a virtue. It's just being cheap. As I watched him unlock the front door, already planning his next story about Italian wine and French cuisine, I had no idea how soon he'd learn the difference between being cheap and being smart. But I was about to find out. I spent the next few days trying to shake off the humiliation from Romano's, but Dad's words kept echoing in my head every time I pulled out my student ID for a discount or sorted through my weekly coupons. The worst part wasn't even the public embarrassment, it was the way he made me feel genuinely ashamed of something I'd always been proud of. My roommate Emma found me stress organizing my budget spreadsheet for the third time that week. You know your dad was being a complete ass, right? She said, looking up from her psychology textbook. My parents think it's awesome that you're so good with money. My mom literally asks me why I can't be more like you. Tell your mom she can have me, I muttered, adjusting my textbook fund calculations. Apparently I'm an embarrassment to the family legacy. But Dad's criticism had lodged itself under my skin like a splinter. When I used my student discount at the campus coffee shop, I wondered if the barista thought I looked pathetic. When I chose the generic brand cereal at the grocery store, I heard Dad's voice calling it small thinking. The breaking point came 3 days later during my shift at the campus bookstore. I was helping a freshman find used versions of her required texts, saving her almost $200 in the process, when my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Family dinner Sunday. Romano's again. 6 p.m. And Sarah, leave the coupons at home this time. The casual arrogance of it made my hands shake. Not an apology for humiliating me. Not even an acknowledgement that maybe he'd been harsh. Just an assumption that I'd show up and play along with his perfect family charade while he continued to make me feel small. I stared at that text for a full minute before typing back, sorry, can't make it. Have to work. It wasn't technically a lie, I picked up an extra shift, partly because I needed the money and partly because I couldn't face another evening of being Dad's favorite target. His response came within seconds, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Family should come first, not your minimum wage job. My minimum wage job that was keeping me debt-free. My minimum wage job that was teaching me more about financial responsibility than Dad's lectures ever had. My minimum wage job that apparently made me a disappointment. I turned my phone face down and tried to focus on inventory, but the anger was building like pressure in a kettle. Every scan of a barcode reminded me of Dad's condescending smile. Every student who thanked me for helping them save money felt like a small rebellion against his worldview. The really twisted part was that Dad genuinely believed he was teaching me some valuable life lesson. In his mind, he was the successful businessman showing his naive daughter how the real world worked. He couldn't see that his real world was built on credit cards and keeping up appearances, while I was actually living within my means. That evening, Emma dragged me to a study group where I met Marcus, a senior economics major who'd grown up poor and worked 3 jobs to pay for school. When I mentioned my dad's philosophy about thinking bigger, Marcus laughed. Sounds like someone who's never had to choose between textbooks and groceries, he said. Rich people love to call budgeting cheap because they've never had to do it. It's like calling swimming showing off when you're drowning. His words crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. Dad wasn't just wrong about money, he was wrong about me. And somehow, some way, I was going to prove it. I just didn't know how yet. The opportunity came 2 weeks later, disguised as a favor. I was in my dorm room, highlighter in hand, working through a particularly brutal macroeconomics chapter when my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen, and my first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. We'd barely spoken since I'd skipped the Romano's dinner, exchanging only terse texts about picking up some books I'd left at home. But curiosity won out. Hello. Sarah, thank God. Dad's voice had that frazzled edge he got when technology wasn't cooperating with his demands. I need your help with something. You're good with computers, right? I almost laughed. Dad had spent years dismissing my part-time job and my practical skills, but the moment his precious gadgets betrayed him, suddenly I was useful. What's wrong? It's this damn banking website. I'm trying to set up automatic payments for my credit cards before the Europe trip, and nothing's working right. The interface keeps glitching, and I've got 3 different cards that need to be scheduled perfectly or the whole reward system gets screwed up. Ah yes, the Europe trip. In the 2 weeks since our Romano's disaster, Dad had somehow managed to work his Italian vacation into every conversation I'd overheard. He'd cornered our mailman to describe the vineyard tour. He'd shown his golf buddies pictures of the 5-star hotel in Paris. The man was practically vibrating with excitement. You know how important the timing is, he continued, and I could hear him clicking aggressively at his mouse. The travel rewards card has to be paid exactly 2 days before the statement date, or they flag your account. And if anything goes wrong with my credit score right now, the whole trip gets fucked. The desperation in his voice was almost amusing. Here was the man who'd lectured me about thinking small, brought to his knees by online banking. Can't you just call the bank? I asked, though I was already closing my textbook. Despite everything, some deep-seated daughter instinct was kicking in. I've been on hold for 40 minutes. The trip is in 10 days, Sarah. 10 days. I can't afford to have some customer service moron mess this up. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had that calculated charm he used when he really needed something. Look, I know we haven't been. I know things have been tense. But you're smart with this stuff. Smarter than me, apparently. It might have been the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. Fine, I said. I'll drive over after my shift. Thank you. Really. I owe you one. 3 hours later, I sat in Dad's home office, staring at a computer screen that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2015. He hovered behind me, radiating anxiety and expensive cologne, while I navigated through his banking portals. Okay, so you've got the Chase Sapphire for travel rewards, the American Express for dining, and the Citi Card for, what's this one for? Cash back on gas and groceries, he said, missing the irony entirely. The Sapphire is the critical one. That's funding most of the hotels and flights. If that payment is even 1 day late, they'll freeze the rewards program and cancel my bookings. I pulled up his account details, noting the balance that made my stomach clench. $43,000. More than I'd make in an entire year at the bookstore. All of it riding on perfectly timed payments and promotional interest rates. Jesus, Dad. This is a lot of money to have on credit cards. It's strategic debt, he said defensively. I've got the cash flow to cover it, and the rewards points are worth thousands. It's called leveraging your assets. Right. Leveraging. I'd heard that lecture before. We spent the next hour setting up his automatic payment system, and I had to admit, it was genuinely complicated. The travel rewards card required payments to post exactly 48 hours before the statement closing date to maintain his premium status. The other cards had their own schedules to maximize his credit utilization ratios. Dad had turned debt management into an elaborate juggling act. So the Sapphire payment needs to go through on the 15th, I said, clicking through the scheduling interface. That's this Friday. And you want me to set it up for the full balance? God, no. Just the minimum plus $50. I need to keep the utilization rate at exactly 30% for optimal credit scoring until after the trip. Dad leaned over my shoulder, breathing down my neck like a nervous parent watching their kid take a driving test. The system is very specific about the timing. I paused, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Wait, you're not paying these off. You're just managing the balances. Sarah, this is sophisticated financial planning. I've got promotional rates, rewards optimization, credit score management. It's not just throwing money at debt like some amateur. The condescension was creeping back into his voice, and I felt that familiar sting of being talked down to. Here I was, helping him navigate a system he couldn't figure out himself, and he was still lecturing me about financial sophistication. Right, I muttered. Sophisticated. The key is precision, he continued, oblivious to my tone. Everything has to happen exactly when I specify, or the whole strategy falls apart. That's why I need someone detail-oriented handling this. Detail-oriented. Finally, one of my supposedly embarrassing traits was useful to him. I worked through each card's payment schedule, Dad hovering and micromanaging every click. Set up the American Express for the 12th, scheduled a city payment for the 18th. And the big one, the Sapphire Reserve card that was funding his dream vacation, set for the 15th at exactly 11:59 p.m. Why so late at night? I asked. The payments process overnight, so 11:59 p.m. gives me the latest possible posting time while still hitting the deadline. It's all about maximizing the float. Dad was practically bouncing with nervous energy. Every extra day I can keep that money in my high-yield savings account earns interest. I almost laughed. The man who'd shamed me for using coupons was literally counting individual days of interest on his credit card payments. Okay, I think that's everything, I said, reviewing the scheduled payments one final time. American Express on the 12th, City on the 18th, and Sapphire on the 15th. All set for automatic processing. Dad exhaled deeply, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Perfect. You're a lifesaver, kiddo. I swear, without this trip. He shook his head. I've been working toward this for 2 years. Every flight, every hotel, every restaurant reservation. It's all coordinated down to the minute. Must be nice, I said again, the same words I'd muttered in our driveway 2 weeks ago. This time, Dad actually heard me. Hey, I know you think I'm being extravagant, but this isn't just throwing money around. This is strategic. Calculated. I've optimized every aspect of this trip for maximum value. By putting it all on credit cards. By leveraging available credit at promotional rates to maximize rewards while maintaining optimal cash flow. His voice took on that familiar lecturing tone. It's the difference between emotional spending and strategic financial planning. I saved the payment schedules and closed the browser, biting back about a dozen responses. Dad saw my silence as agreement and clapped me on the shoulder. Thanks again, Sarah. Really. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye on money matters, but this is exactly the kind of thinking that separates success from mediocrity. I drove back to campus with his words ringing in my ears, not yet realizing I'd just been handed the perfect weapon. The next few days passed in a blur of midterms and work shifts, but I couldn't shake the image of Dad frantically hovering over my shoulder as I set up his precious payment system. Every time I remembered his condescending explanation about strategic financial planning, my jaw clenched a little tighter. What really got to me wasn't just the hypocrisy, though watching him obsess over maximizing 1 day's worth of interest after shaming me for saving $20 was pretty rich. It was the way he'd called me detail-oriented, like it was finally a useful trait, when 2 weeks earlier those same careful habits had made me an embarrassment to the family. I was restocking textbooks during my Thursday shift when Emma texted me a screenshot from Dad's Facebook page. He'd posted a photo of his boarding passes with the caption, 48 hours until the adventure begins. First class to Rome, then 3 weeks of living the dream. Sometimes you have to invest in experiences that matter. Hashtag life is short, hashtag dream big. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. His golf buddies posting jealous reactions, mom's friends gushing about how well-deserved the trip was, my aunt asking for restaurant recommendations in Paris. Dad was eating up every bit of attention, responding to each comment with detailed descriptions of his itinerary. Your dad's really milking this vacation thing, Emma said when I showed her the post. He's been planning it for 2 years, I muttered, shelving a stack of chemistry textbooks with more force than necessary. Apparently it's the culmination of his sophisticated financial planning. Didn't you say he put the whole thing on credit cards? Multiple credit cards. With this incredibly complicated payment schedule that had to be timed perfectly or everything would fall apart. I paused, a strange thought tickling the back of my mind. He was completely panicked about it. Said if even one payment was late, they'd freeze his rewards program and cancel his bookings. Emma raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a pretty fragile system for someone lecturing you about smart money management. That's when it hit me. I'd set up those payments exactly as Dad had instructed. Every date, every amount, every timing specification had come directly from him while he breathed down my neck and micromanaged every click. The American Express on the 12th, that was tomorrow. The Sapphire on the 15th, Monday. The City card on the 18th. But something was nagging at me about those dates. During my dinner break, I pulled out my phone and navigated to the calendar app. Let me think through this again. Dad had been very specific about the Sapphire payment needing to post exactly 48 hours before the statement closing date to maintain his premium status. I counted backward from his travel date. If he was leaving Saturday, and the payment was scheduled for Friday the 15th, and it needed to be 48 hours before the statement date. My stomach dropped. Friday the 15th wasn't this Friday. This Friday was the 8th. I pulled up the calendar again, double-checking the dates. Today was Thursday the 7th, tomorrow was Friday the 8th. The payment I'd scheduled for, the 15th, was actually set for next Friday, a full week later than Dad needed it. Had I misunderstood his instructions? I replayed our conversation in my head, hearing his voice again. The Sapphire payment needs to go through on the 15th. That's this Friday. But this Friday wasn't the 15th. This Friday was the 8th. My hands started shaking as the implications sank in. Dad's most critical payment, the one funding his entire dream vacation, was scheduled to process 7 days late. His credit card company would flag the late payment, freeze his rewards program, and according to his own panicked explanation, cancel all his bookings. The smart thing to do would be to call him immediately. Tell him about the date confusion. Fix the payment schedule and save his trip. But then I remembered Romano's. The way he'd called me cheap and embarrassing in front of the entire restaurant. The way he'd made me pay $40 for a $19 meal while lecturing me about real-world financial planning. The text demanding I leave my coupons at home like they were something shameful. I remembered his Facebook post from an hour ago, bragging about his investment and experiences, while I calculated whether I could afford both textbooks and groceries this week. I remembered him calling my careful budgeting pathetic and small thinking, while his own sophisticated system was apparently so fragile that a single missed payment would bring the whole thing crashing down. My finger hovered over his contact information. One phone call would fix everything. Instead, I put my phone away and went back to work. After all, he'd been very specific about following his instructions exactly. And I was nothing if not detail-oriented. The next morning, I woke up with my stomach in knots. All night I tossed and turned, Dad's voice echoing in my head, everything has to happen exactly when I specify, or the whole strategy falls apart. I'd followed his instructions exactly. He'd said, the 15th, and I'd scheduled it for the 15th. It wasn't my fault he'd gotten his dates mixed up while hovering over me like a nervous helicopter parent. But the guilt was eating me alive. During my Friday morning lecture, I couldn't focus on anything Professor Martinez was saying about market equilibrium. My phone felt like it was burning a hole in my backpack. One text. That's all it would take. Hey Dad, double-check your payment dates. Except he'd specifically told me I was detail-oriented, that he trusted me to handle it correctly. He'd made such a big deal about his sophisticated financial planning and how I needed to learn the difference between strategic thinking and my pathetic penny pinching. When class ended, I practically sprinted to the campus coffee shop where Emma was waiting with my usual order, small coffee, no fancy additions, because apparently I think small. You look like hell, she said, sliding the cup across the table. I think I screwed up. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. Dad's payment thing. I think I scheduled it for the wrong date. Emma frowned. What do you mean wrong date? Didn't he tell you exactly when to set it up? He said the 15th, that's this Friday. But this Friday isn't the 15th. This Friday is today, the 8th. The 15th is next Friday. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, trying to stop them from shaking. His payment is going to be a week late. Holy shit. Emma's eyes widened. Didn't you say that would mess up his whole trip? Cancel everything. Freeze his accounts. Tank his credit score. I felt sick just saying it. He leaves for Rome tomorrow morning. So call him. Tell him what happened. I stared into my coffee, watching the steam curl upward. He was so condescending, Emma. Standing there lecturing me about strategic financial planning while I fixed his mess. He couldn't even figure out his own banking website, but somehow I'm the one who doesn't understand how money works. Sarah. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. I get that he was an ass. But this isn't just about missing a fancy vacation. If his credit gets screwed up, that affects everything. His mortgage, his business loans, all of it. She was right, and I knew it. This was bigger than just Dad learning a lesson about humility. This was his entire financial life. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Dad's at the airport getting his boarding passes printed early. He's literally taking selfies with the departure board. This is embarrassing. Attached was a photo of Dad grinning next to a screen showing Flight 447TO Rome, on time. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning, practically glowing with excitement. The same man who'd called me an embarrassment to the family was now embarrassing himself in the middle of LaGuardia Airport, and somehow that was perfectly fine. My phone buzzed again. Another Facebook notification. Dad had posted the airport selfie with the caption, "The early bird catches the first-class worm." Last-minute prep before the trip of a lifetime. When you plan everything perfectly, success is inevitable. Hashtag strategic, hashtag dreams come true. When you plan everything perfectly. I screenshotted the post and shoved my phone back in my bag. I have to get to work, I told Emma, standing up abruptly. Sarah, wait. What are you going to do? I paused at the door, thinking about Dad's smug smile as he'd forced me to pay for everyone else's expensive meals. His lecture about thinking small. His assumption that I'd just show up to the next family dinner and pretend nothing had happened. I'm going to be detail-oriented, I said. Just like he asked. The weekend crawled by like torture. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Dad calling in a panic, having discovered the payment issue. But Saturday came and went with nothing but radio silence and increasingly excited social media posts from the airport, then the plane, then the hotel in Rome. By Sunday evening, I was a wreck. I checked his Facebook page obsessively, watching him document every moment of his first day in Italy. Photos of the hotel lobby. The view from his room. A shot of some ridiculously expensive-looking pasta with the caption, "When in Rome." Sometimes you have to splurge for the authentic experience. Hashtag worth every penny. The irony was suffocating. Emma found me stress-eating microwave popcorn in our dorm room, my laptop open to 3 different tabs, Dad's social media, the calendar app, and a credit card company website where I've been researching their late payment policies. Still no word from him, she asked, settling onto her bed with her psychology textbook. Nothing. He's having the time of his life. I gestured at my laptop screen, where Dad had just posted a sunset photo from the Spanish Steps. 37 likes and counting. Maybe the payment went through fine. Maybe you remembered the date wrong. I'd been clinging to that hope all weekend, but I triple-checked everything. The payment was scheduled for Friday the 15th, which was this coming Friday. 7 days too late. The credit card company's website says late payments are processed immediately after the due date, I said, reading from the screen. Account restrictions are applied within 24 to 48 hours for premium rewards members. Emma winced. So if his payment was due yesterday, his account should be frozen by tomorrow. Maybe Tuesday at the latest. I closed the laptop, unable to look at any more of Dad's gleeful vacation posts. He has no idea what's coming. Monday morning brought 3 things, a pop quiz in macroeconomics that I completely bombed, a text from Mom asking if I'd heard from Dad, he'd apparently been too busy sightseeing to call home, and a gnawing anxiety that made it impossible to eat anything more substantial than crackers. I was restocking returned textbooks during my afternoon shift when Marcus stopped by the bookstore. He took one look at my face and immediately asked what was wrong. Remember that thing I told you about? With my dad's payment system? I kept my voice low, glancing around to make sure no other students were within earshot. I think I accidentally scheduled something wrong. His trip might be compromised. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Compromised how? I gave him the abbreviated version, the date confusion, the late payment, the potential account freeze. With every detail, his expression grew more serious. Sarah, that's not just a compromised vacation. If they flag him for late payments while he's overseas, his other cards could get frozen too. He could be stranded. My stomach dropped. I'd been so focused on the poetic justice of Dad's dream trip getting cancelled that I hadn't considered the domino effect. What if he couldn't pay for hotels? What if his other credit cards got suspended? What if he was stuck in a foreign country with no access to money? I have to call him, I said, fumbling for my phone. But Marcus caught my wrist gently. Hold up. You said he specifically told you to set it up for the 15th. Yes, but... And you did exactly what he asked. I nodded miserably. Then this isn't your fault. He gave you wrong information while acting like a condescending ass about your financial skills. Marcus's voice was firm. Maybe experiencing some real consequences will teach him something about humility. That evening, I sat in my dorm room staring at my phone for 2 hours, Dad's contact information pulled up on the screen. My finger hovered over the call button at least a dozen times. Each time I started to press it, I remembered Romano's. The public humiliation. The way he'd made me feel ashamed of being responsible with money. But then I'd think about him stranded in Rome with frozen credit cards, and the guilt would crash over me again. Finally, I compromised. I opened a new text message and typed, hope the trip is going well. Make sure all your automatic payments are processing correctly, sometimes international travel can trigger security holds. It was vague enough to maintain plausible deniability, but specific enough that he might check his accounts. I stared at the message for 10 minutes before deleting it. After all, Dad had been very clear about not wanting my financial advice. Tuesday morning arrived with a notification that made my blood run cold. Dad had tagged me in a Facebook post from what looked like an incredibly expensive restaurant in Rome. The photo showed him raising a glass of wine that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Incredible dinner at La Pergola, 3 Michelin stars. Sarah, this is what I mean about investing in experiences. Sometimes you have to think beyond coupons to truly live. Hashtag Rome life, hashtag worth it. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a slap. Even from thousands of miles away, he couldn't resist taking another shot at my cheap habits. I stared at that post for 5 solid minutes, watching the likes and comments pour in from family friends praising his well-deserved indulgence. My guilt evaporated, replaced by something harder and colder. By Wednesday, I developed an obsessive refresh habit with both his social media and the banking website's customer service page. Dad's posts continue their parade of excess, private Vatican tour, designer shopping on Via del Corso, first-class train tickets to Florence. Each caption contains some subtle dig about living fully or not settling for less. But the banking website status page had an ominous update. Some customers may experience temporary service restrictions while we update security protocols. My hands shook as I screenshotted it. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Thursday brought the first crack in Dad's perfect vacation facade. His morning post from the Uffizi gallery was oddly terse, just a photo, no caption about strategic spending or thinking big. Then, radio silence for the rest of the day. That evening, my phone exploded. First, a missed call from Dad. Then another. Then a text that made my stomach flip, call me now. Urgent. I let it ring twice more before finally answering. Sarah, thank God. Dad's voice was strained, with traffic noise in the background. I need you to walk me through that banking setup we did. Something's wrong with my Sapphire card. My mouth went dry. Wrong how? It got declined at dinner tonight. Completely humiliating, they had to hold our table while I called the bank. The frustration in his voice was palpable. Customer service said something about a missed payment, but that's impossible. We set up automatic payments. Maybe it's just a security hold because you're overseas. That's what I thought, but they're saying my account is flagged for late payment. The payment was supposed to process on. I heard papers rustling. Friday the 8th. But when I checked the scheduled payments, it shows the 15th. My heart hammered against my ribs. The 15th? That's this Friday. I know it's this Friday. That's the problem. Dad's voice rose, and I could picture him pacing some Roman street corner. I specifically told you the payment needed to go through on the 8th. The 8th, Sarah. Not the 15th. But you said the 15th was. I said the payment was due Friday, which was the 8th. The statement date is the 15th. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. He'd said the 15th while meaning the 8th, and I'd scheduled it for exactly what he'd said. A classic miscommunication that my guilt had transformed into something much more complicated. Can't you just make the payment now? I asked weakly. I tried. The account is frozen pending review. They won't unlock it until the automatic payment processes, but that's not until Friday. And here's the best part, they've suspended my reward status, so even if I can get the card working again, my hotel reservations might get cancelled. The panic in his voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. Dad, who always had a plan and a backup plan, was completely out of control. I need you to call them, he continued. You set up the system, so maybe they'll let you explain what happened. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the choice ahead of me. I can try calling them, I said, my voice barely steady. But Dad, I'm not on your accounts. They won't talk to me about your personal banking information. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When Dad finally spoke, his voice had that dangerous quiet tone I remembered from childhood, the one that meant someone was about to get blamed for everything. Sarah, I need you to think very carefully about what happened when we set up those payments. Because right now, I'm looking at a $7,000 hotel bill that I can't pay, and my credit cards are useless pieces of plastic. $7,000. My entire yearly income, just for a few nights in fancy hotels. I scheduled everything exactly like you told me to, I said, which was technically true. You said the 15th, so I put the 15th. The 15th is the statement date. The payment was due the 8th. His voice cracked with frustration. How could you not understand the difference? There it was, the blame shifting into high gear. Somehow this was going to be my fault for not reading his mind, not his fault for giving unclear instructions while breathing down my neck and micromanaging every click. You were standing right there watching me set it up, I said, my own anger finally breaking through. If the date was wrong, why didn't you catch it? Because I trusted you to understand basic financial scheduling. I told you this was critical, Sarah. I told you the whole trip depended on perfect timing. In the background, I could hear Mom's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. Dad must have been pacing their hotel room, probably gesturing wildly while she tried to calm him down. What did the bank say exactly? I asked, grabbing a pen to take notes. Maybe there's something else we can do. They said the account is locked pending the automatic payment processing. Even if I transfer money from another account, it won't clear the late payment flag until the scheduled payment goes through. And that's not until Friday. Papers rustled again. Which means 3 more days of frozen credit, and the hotel wants payment tomorrow morning or they're moving us to standard rooms. Standard rooms. The horror in his voice made it sound like they'd threatened to put him in a cardboard box. Can't you pay with a different card? The hotel authorization was specifically for the Sapphire. Switching payment methods means losing the suite upgrade, the late checkout, the restaurant credits, everything I booked through the rewards program. Dad's breathing was getting faster, more panicked. Do you understand what you've done? This isn't just about money. This is about 2 years of planning, 2 years of optimizing every detail. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I'm really sorry, Dad. I thought I was following your instructions exactly. Sorry doesn't fix this. The explosion I've been waiting for finally came. Sorry doesn't unhumiliate me in front of a restaurant full of people when my card got declined. Sorry doesn't get me back into the Vatican tour I had to cancel because I can't guarantee payment. Mom's voice got louder in the background, and I heard Dad take a shaky breath. Look, he said, his voice forced back under control. I'm going to text you the customer service number. Call them first thing in the morning and explain that there was a technical error when you set up the payments. Tell them it was a website glitch or something. Maybe if it comes from the person who originally scheduled it. Dad, they're not going to. Just try, Sarah. Please. I'm begging you here. The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone in the sudden quiet of my dorm room. Within seconds, a text arrived with a customer service number and a desperate message. Call at 8 a.m. sharp. Tell them whatever you have to tell them. Whatever I had to tell them. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, Dad's panicked voice still echoing in my ears. For the first time since this whole mess started, I held his entire vacation, his entire financial stability, completely in my hands. The next morning, I sat in the campus library at 7:45 a.m., staring at the customer service number Dad had texted me. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I couldn't bring myself to take a sip. My stomach was churning too violently. At exactly 8 a.m., I dialed. Chase Sapphire Customer Service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today? Hi, I need to ask about a payment scheduling issue. My dad's account got flagged for a late payment, but I think there might have been a technical error when I helped him set up the automatic payments. I'd be happy to help, but I'll need to speak directly with the account holder for any account-specific information. Of course. I'd known this would happen, but hearing it confirmed made my chest tight. He's overseas right now and having trouble with international calling. Is there any way? I'm sorry, but due to privacy regulations, I can only discuss account details with the account holder. He could add you as an authorized user if he calls from his registered phone number. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking slightly. There was literally nothing I could do from here, which meant Dad was stuck waiting until Friday for the automatic payment to process. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Your father is beside himself. The hotel is being very understanding, but we had to move to a smaller room and lost our dinner reservations at that place he's been talking about for months. Can you please try calling the bank again? Then another from Jake. Dude, Dad is losing his mind. He's been on the phone with like 6 different banks all morning. Mom's trying to keep him calm, but he keeps saying something about his credit score being ruined forever. The guilt hit me like a physical weight. This wasn't just about a fancy vacation anymore, Dad's entire financial reputation was taking a hit. Late payments stayed on credit reports for years. His interest rates would increase. His credit limits might get reduced. But then my phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Dad had posted again. The photo showed him and Mom sitting in what was clearly a much smaller hotel room, but he was still trying to maintain his image. Sometimes travel throws you curveballs. When life gives you lemons, you make limoncello. Still living the dream in Rome. Hashtag adapt and overcome. Hashtag make it work. The comments were already rolling in. What happened to the suite? Everything okay? You two look stressed. And Dad was responding to each one with increasingly elaborate explanations about minor technical difficulties and bank security protocols. He couldn't even admit publicly that his perfect financial planning had fallen apart. I screenshotted the post, remembering his Romano's lecture about embarrassing the family. Now he was the one scrambling to save face while his carefully constructed image crumbled in real time. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. Please tell me you called the bank, she said without preamble. They won't talk to me. Privacy laws. I slumped deeper into the library chair. Dad's stuck until Friday. Jesus. My mom saw his Facebook post. She said he looks miserable despite all the positive captions. What are you going to do? I stared out the library window at students hurrying to morning classes, most of them probably surviving on ramen and student discounts just like me. Meanwhile, Dad was having a meltdown in Rome because his $7,000 hotel suite got downgraded. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me wants to fix this, but part of me thinks maybe he needs to learn what it actually feels like when financial planning goes wrong. Sarah, this is getting really serious. If his credit gets screwed up, then maybe he'll understand why I'm so careful with money, I interrupted. Maybe he'll realize that budgeting and using coupons isn't cheap, it's protecting yourself from exactly this kind of situation. Emma was quiet for a moment. You're really going to let this play out? I thought about Dad's smug face at Romano's. His Facebook post tagging me from the Michelin star restaurant. His assumption that I'd just magically fix his mess from 3,000 miles away. He made this bed, I said finally. Maybe it's time he learned how to sleep in it. Friday morning arrived with a string of increasingly frantic messages from Dad. Photos of him at various ATMs around Rome, all displaying transaction declined messages. Screenshots of his banking app showing the payment still pending until 11:59 p.m. A rambling voice message about how the hotel was threatening to put them in the economy wing if payment wasn't resolved by checkout time. The economy wing, Sarah, his voice cracked through my phone speaker. Do you know what that means? No room service, no concierge, shared bathrooms down the hall like some college dormitory. I almost laughed. Dad was getting a taste of how the other half lived, and he was treating it like a humanitarian crisis. But then Jake called, and his voice was different. Worried in a way that made my stomach drop. Sarah, I think something's really wrong. I just got off the phone with Mom, and she sounds scared. Dad hasn't slept in 2 days. He's been calling banks, credit monitoring services, even his financial advisor back home. He's convinced this is going to destroy his credit permanently. I set down my economics textbook, giving Jake my full attention. It's one late payment. It's not the end of the world. That's what I said, but Mom says he keeps talking about domino effects. How his mortgage rate might increase, how his business credit lines could get reviewed, how this could cost him tens of thousands in the long run. Jake's voice dropped. She said he's talking like his whole financial life is over. A chill ran down my spine. I'd been so focused on the poetic justice of Dad's vacation getting ruined that I hadn't fully considered the long-term implications. His mortgage was probably tied to his credit score. His business loans definitely were. A single late payment could trigger reviews across all his accounts. Jake, is he okay? Like, mentally? Mom says he's not eating. Just pacing their tiny hotel room, refreshing his banking apps every 5 minutes, and mumbling about how he should have been more careful. Jake paused. She asked me to ask you, is there really nothing you can do? Before I could answer, my phone started buzzing with another call. Dad's number. I have to take this, I told Jake, switching over. Sarah. Dad's voice was hoarse, barely recognizable. The payment goes through tonight, right? You're absolutely sure about the timing? 11:59 p.m., just like you specified. And then how long until the account gets unfrozen? The website says 24 to 48 hours for processing, but what if there are complications? What if they need additional verification? His words were coming out in a rush, like he'd been rehearsing this conversation. We're supposed to take the train to Florence tomorrow morning, but if the cards don't work. I could hear Mom in the background, her voice gentle but strained. Richard, honey, maybe we should just come home early. We can plan another trip when. No. Dad's shout was so sudden and loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I'm not running home with my tail between my legs because of a technical glitch. 2 years, Linda. 2 years of planning, and I'm not letting some banking software ruin it. When he came back to the phone, his voice was eerily calm. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. I need you to call the bank at exactly midnight your time, that's when the payment should process. I need you to confirm it went through and demand immediate account restoration. Dad, they won't. They have to. You set up the system, so there has to be some record of the technical error. Tell them it was website malfunction, tell them I was given incorrect information, tell them whatever you have to tell them. There was that phrase again. Whatever you have to tell them. Dad wanted me to lie to fix his mess. I'll try, I said, the words tasting bitter. But I can't promise anything. You have to promise everything, Dad's voice cracked completely. Because if this doesn't get fixed by tomorrow morning, I don't know what I'm going to do. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in the sudden silence of my dorm room. Outside, I could hear other students laughing as they headed to weekend parties, living their normal college lives while I sat in the middle of a family crisis I'd helped create. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down. This had spiraled so far beyond teaching Dad a lesson about humility. This was destroying him. And the worst part? I was the only one who could stop it. That night, I sat in my dorm room until 11:58 p.m., phone in hand, watching the seconds tick by on my laptop clock. Emma had gone to a party, leaving me alone with my guilt and the weight of what was about to happen. 11:59 p.m. Somewhere in the banking system's digital maze, Dad's payment was processing. I refreshed his account page obsessively for the next hour, but nothing changed. The payment showed as pending, with an estimated processing time of 24 to 48 hours. Dad would have to wait until at least Sunday, possibly Monday, before his account was restored. My phone buzzed with a text from him. Did it go through? Can you see any changes? I typed and deleted a dozen responses before settling on, payment is processing. Says 24 to 48 hours for account restoration. The response came within seconds. What do you mean 24 to 48 hours? Then my phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately regretted it when I heard the message, Dad's voice, raw and desperate, begging me to call the bank's emergency line, to demand supervisor escalation, to fix this before their train to Florence in the morning. I was still staring at my phone when it rang again. This time it was Mom. Sarah, honey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Her voice was gentler than Dad's, but there was something underneath it that made me nervous. When you helped your father set up those payments, did everything go smoothly? No confusion about dates or timing? My throat went dry. Why do you ask? Because your father has been going over that evening obsessively, trying to figure out what went wrong. He keeps saying he told you the 8th, but the payment was scheduled for the 15th. She paused, and I could hear Dad's agitated voice in the background. He's starting to think maybe there was some kind of miscommunication. The word hung in the air between us. Miscommunication. Such a clean, innocent way to describe what had happened. I scheduled it exactly like he told me to, I said, which was still technically true. I believe you, sweetheart. But Sarah. Mom's voice dropped lower, like she was trying not to let Dad overhear. He's not handling this well. He hasn't eaten since yesterday, he's not sleeping, and he keeps talking about how this is going to ruin everything. Not just the trip, everything. The house, his business, our retirement plans. I felt like I was going to throw up. Mom, it's one late payment. It can't be that catastrophic. That's what I keep telling him, but you know how your father gets when he thinks he's losing control. She sighed heavily. He's got himself convinced that this is the first domino in some kind of financial collapse. He spent 3 hours this morning calculating how much a credit score drop could cost us in increased interest rates over the next decade. Of course he did. Dad had always been obsessive about control, about having every detail perfectly planned and managed. This kind of unexpected chaos was his worst nightmare. There's something else, Mom continued. He's been talking about cutting the trip short. Coming home tomorrow to manage the crisis in person. He's convinced that if he's not physically at the bank first thing Monday morning, something terrible is going to happen. My heart sank. Dad was going to sacrifice the rest of his dream vacation because of the payment mess. All those months of planning, all those restaurant reservations and tour bookings, abandoned because he was spiraling into panic. Maybe that's not such a bad idea, I said weakly. He could get everything sorted out and then plan another trip later. Sarah, you don't understand. This isn't just about the money or the trip. This is about your father's entire sense of self-worth. He's built his identity around being financially savvy, around having everything under control. Mom's voice cracked slightly. He keeps saying he's a failure, that he's let the whole family down. I've never seen him like this. The guilt crashed over me like a tidal wave. This wasn't teaching Dad humility anymore, this was breaking him. I hung up with Mom and immediately tried to call Dad back, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried again. And again. By the 4th attempt, I was pacing my tiny dorm room like a caged animal, imagining him sitting in that cramped hotel room, spiraling deeper into panic with every passing hour. At 2 a.m., my phone finally buzzed with a text from him, can't sleep. Keep running numbers. If credit score drops 50 points, mortgage rate increases by 0.3%. That's $847 more per month. $305,000 over life of loan. How does one missed payment cost $305,000? I stared at that text, my stomach churning. Dad wasn't just worried about his vacation anymore, he was catastrophizing everything, calculating worst-case scenarios that might never happen. But I knew him well enough to understand that those numbers would loop in his head endlessly, each calculation making the crisis feel more real and more devastating. Another text arrived, hotel wants payment guarantee for Florence leg of trip. Other cards maxed from booking everything on reward strategy. If Sapphire doesn't clear by morning, we're stuck in Rome with no way to continue trip. Then another, called business partner. Had to tell him about credit situation in case it affects our loan applications next quarter. He's concerned about my financial management. 20 years of partnership and now he questions my judgment. I realized with growing horror that Dad's carefully constructed financial house of cards was collapsing in real time. He'd leveraged everything, credit cards, business relationships, his reputation, on maintaining perfect control over his finances. One missed payment was creating ripple effects I'd never anticipated. My phone rang. Jake's name flashed on the screen. Sarah, where the hell are you? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. His voice was tight with stress. Dad called me at 1 a.m., ranting about compound interest and bankruptcy. He wanted me to call our bank and verify the family's financial stability. Whatever that means. Jake, He's losing it. Completely losing it. Mom says he's been up all night writing lists of everything that could go wrong. Their mortgage, their business loans, their retirement accounts. He's convinced this one payment is going to destroy 30 years of building credit. Through the phone, I could hear Jake moving around, probably pacing just like I was. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Did you mess up when you set up his payments? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. My little brother, asking me directly if I'd sabotaged our father's financial life. I opened my mouth to give him the same technically true answer I'd given everyone else, but the words wouldn't come. It's complicated, I finally managed. What the hell does that mean? It means Dad gave me confusing instructions while breathing down my neck and micromanaging everything I did. It means he said, the 15th, and I put, the 15th, and now somehow that's my fault. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, did he actually say the 15th, or did you just hear what you wanted to hear? The accusation in his voice made my chest tight. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've been pissed at him since that restaurant thing. It means maybe you weren't paying as much attention as you should have been when you were setting up something this important. I was paying attention. I stopped, realizing how defensive I sounded. How guilty I sounded. Look, I don't care whose fault it is, Jake continued. But Dad is talking about flying home tomorrow and spending his entire retirement fund to hire some financial recovery specialist. Mom's trying to calm him down, but she's scared too. They're both acting like the world is ending. My phone buzzed with another text from Dad. Sarah, I need you to write down exactly what happened when we set up payments. Every word, every click, every detail. My lawyer says if there was website malfunction or unclear interface, we might have grounds for complaint against bank. His lawyer. Dad had called his lawyer at 2 a.m. about a credit card payment. This wasn't just a ruined vacation anymore. This was a complete psychological breakdown, and I was the only one who could stop it. But stopping it meant admitting what I'd really done. The breaking point came at 6 a.m. with a call from Mom that I almost didn't answer. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the exhaustion underneath. Your father is at the Rome airport right now, trying to book the first flight home. He's convinced that every hour he stays here is costing us thousands of dollars in potential financial damage. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Mom, the payment will clear. His account will be restored. This isn't permanent. I know that, and you know that, but he's not thinking rationally anymore. He spent the entire night calculating worst-case scenarios and calling people who can't help. She paused, and I heard the sound of airport announcements in the background. Sarah, I'm going to ask you one more time. Is there anything at all, that you could do to fix this faster? I closed my eyes, seeing Dad's face at Romano's, hearing his voice calling me cheap and embarrassing. Then I thought about him sitting in that airport, probably shaking with anxiety, convinced his entire life was falling apart. There might be something, I said quietly. The truth was, I'd been researching all night. Chase had an emergency account restoration process for customers experiencing genuine hardship while traveling. It required documentation and a detailed explanation of the circumstances, but it could unlock his account within hours instead of days. I could fix this. I'd always been able to fix this. What do you need me to do? Mom asked. Nothing. I need to call Dad directly. I hung up and immediately dialed his number, my hands trembling slightly. He answered on the first ring. Sarah, thank God. Did you reach the bank? Can they expedite? Dad, stop. Just listen to me for a minute. I took a deep breath, knowing what I was about to say would change everything. The payment confusion was partly my fault. You said the 15th and I scheduled it for the 15th, but you meant the 8th. I should have clarified instead of just assuming. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. What are you saying? His voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying I can fix this. Chase has an emergency restoration process for travel situations. I've been researching it all night. I can file the request with detailed documentation about the scheduling miscommunication. You can fix this. Right now. I can try. But Dad, I need you to promise me something. When this is over, when you're back to enjoying your vacation, I need you to understand something about money. Sarah, I'll promise you anything if you can fix this. I thought about my careful budgets, my coupon collection, my part-time job that was teaching me more about financial reality than his credit card juggling act ever could. Being careful with money isn't being cheap. It's being smart enough to avoid exactly this kind of situation. My coupons and budgets aren't embarrassing, they're protecting me from ever feeling as scared as you do right now. Dad's voice cracked when he responded. You're right. God, you're absolutely right. I was an ass at that restaurant, and I've been an ass about your financial habits. You're the smart one here, and I'm the idiot who put his entire vacation on credit cards. You're not an idiot, Dad. But you owe me an apology. A real one. I owe you more than that. I owe you the biggest apology of my life. 2 hours later, after navigating customer service hell and filling out more forms than my economics final exam, Dad's Sapphire account was restored. His text message was simple, card working. Upgraded back to sweet. Thank you for saving my ass. That evening, he posted a photo from what looked like an incredible restaurant in Florence, but the caption was different from his usual bragging. Grateful to be here thanks to my brilliant daughter Sarah, who taught me that being careful with money isn't cheap, it's smart. Sorry it took me so long to figure that out. Hashtag proud dad, hashtag smart kids. When he got home 2 weeks later, the first thing he did was hand me an envelope. Inside was $200 cash and a note, for the textbooks you couldn't buy because you had to cover my expensive mistake at Romano's. Also, I'd like to take you to dinner anywhere you want, and yes, bring your coupons. I smiled, tucking the money into my carefully organized wallet. Romano's sounds perfect, I said. I found a 2-for-1 appetizer coupon in yesterday's paper. Dad laughed, really laughed, not his usual condescending chuckle. I can't wait to use it.